Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Today, my very special guest is the Waxahachie City Manager, Mr. Michael Scott. How you doing, sir?
Hey, fantastic, DV. How are you this evening?
I'm good. So every year I have the city manager on to kind of give an update about what's going on in the city, usually around budget time, so he could talk about what the budget priorities are, kind of what happened last year, kind of give a little bit of a update for the people of Waxahachie. Now, if you don't know what a city manager does, he's not the politics. He doesn't do the politics. He does numbers. He's the one who actually runs the daily operations of the city. So it's pretty cool to have him on because the information that you get, that's what he does. That's what he does all day. So thank you again for coming on the show.
You bet. I always enjoy joining it.
I wish we could have done it in person. Maybe next time we'll definitely do it on purpose on over there. But can you tell people just briefly about yourself before we run into the good, cool stuff?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Again, Michael Scott, City Manager. I've been in Waxahachie now for about 22 years. Originally, I hired as the downtown director. I've been the planning director before. I was 10 years as the assistant city manager, and now 7 as the city manager. And I have to say, we have a wonderful community, and I'll tell you, I feel nothing but great support from our community. Our city council has been very supportive historically, and it makes my job very easy to know that people are all moving in the same direction and like the direction we're going as a city. I love what I do, and we've got a fantastic team here to serve our community. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah, and it's growing, and there's so many moving parts to it that you deal with on a daily basis. So, how did the last year go as far as priorities that you had last year for the budget? How did we do? Did things go over budget? Talk to me.
Yeah, so it's funny when I give reports, especially like to the Chamber of Commerce or some of the community groups. I'm almost always saying, "Hey, we're in the budget process. We're in the budget process," because it seems like we're never not in the budget process because it seems to span, basically 9 months of the year. We adopt in October, and then probably just after the first of the year, late February, early March, we're already back into talking about the next year. And so we're kind of in that mode right now. So when you say how the budget go last year, really, you know what? Honestly, we're in the middle of implementing the budget. We just, feel like we just adopted in October. But I will say this, that we adopted a very aggressive budget this past year in the way of projects and all. We're executing just across, all departments, utilities, public works, streets, parks, police and fire. I mean, really, just all departments had major projects that they were working on, and we're right in the throes of those right now. Council was very supportive last summer, and then into the adoption for October of the projects that we had brought forward. We're moving ahead on those right now. Everything seems to be clipping along as far as in budget. Nothing ever happens. The thing in public sector, things don't seem to ever happen as fast as we would like, as I would like. I'm originally kind of a private sector guy, so I like to see things happen pretty quickly. But it's kind of an adjustment. But that's kind of the nature of it. We have to publicly bid projects. That slows things down. We've got to make sure things engineered just right, and a lot of times that can take a little bit of extra time. So we're partway through this fiscal year 24, and here it is, April, and we're continuing to monitor those projects, and yeah, so our street projects are active. There's dirt flying all over town. We're causing all sorts of inconvenience for our citizens in the way of water and sewer projects. We apologize for that, but that's progress, right? So yeah, things are going well, and we're continuing to monitor it. And really, part of our FY25 budget process is continuing to monitor to see where we're going to end up FY24. That's obviously our starting point for the next year. So we're doing that right now.
Every year we talk, when we do talk on this, you talk like one of the things that really stunned me, and it continues to sting me, when you talk about the roads, the roads that have to be done, how much that will cost versus how much we have. So in that currently, but last year's budget, how much was allotted for roads, and how's that turned out as far as projects completed, etc.?
Yeah, so road projects, can take on, and this is going to be a long-winded answer, so I apologize. So,
That's okay.
Road projects can take on a number of different flavors, right? You can have complete reconstruction where you're looking at the entire corridor. Those are like 270-day, sometimes a full year project. So those take a long time to actually complete. We have other projects where we're just top surfacing the streets, and those are done kind of in bulk. We do a number of those a year, and so all told, last year, gosh, I think we've allocated maybe $10 million between complete reconstruction and just the rehab projects. And so we do those throughout the year. Those are some of the projects that are underway right now. We've picked certain areas to focus on, and those streets were ripe for redevelopment at this time. And so yeah, those are in construction right now and are clipping along. But so usually we're looking each year, upwards of $10 million towards streets to try to make some headway on those streets. We have an active 5-year capital improvement plan that lays all those streets out, and we try to prioritize where's the biggest bang for the buck, where's the biggest need. You look at traffic counts, look at the condition of pavement, and kind of where those needs are, and then push the dollars to those projects that have the biggest bang for the buck.
What was the biggest need?
Well, Bellevue Edition is one that we have really been active in the last several years because it is it had been neglected for a while. Let's just put it that way. And it was time to address that. And so really we've had to spend extensive dollars in Bellevue, taking down about a street and a half a year. And each one of those streets is $4 million. So then you have a half of another street that kind of connects them, the little connector streets in between. So we're spending, close to $5 million a year just in Bellevue alone. And then we try to spread it around because there's other projects, whether it be, heading towards the older parts of community, whether it be in Eastern Waxahachie or Southern like Bellevue edition or Bullard Heights edition. The University edition needs attention, and we continue to spread it around and try to knock off those streets as well. Because they need it as well. I always say we're blessed with being an old community, but with that blessing comes old streets and old pipes, and that just requires a lot of rehab work.
What's the big number? I remember you telling me sort of the big number on what's needed on road repair. What's that big number looking like right now?
Well,
kind of a guesstimate, because you gave me a guesstimate the last time. Like this is. Yeah, tell me that number.
I mean, like if I could snap my fingers today and say we're going to catch up on all of our streets, it'd be probably about an $80 million, hit. Yeah, but obviously you can't do that in 1 year, right? And so right. The council, to their credit, this goes back, probably a decade that we've been really working actively on our streets program. They asked that question, and to their credit, they didn't back down. They said, you know what, that's a big number, and let's start knocking it out. And we put in place our active CIP. We issue bonds every year to try to make headway on that. And it's like, it's eating an elephant. So we're just taking a bite at a time each year and making headway on that. And I think we've done a great job. There's always more streets that need to be done because, people are with increased traffic and eroding streets and everything else. There's always another project around on the horizon to tackle.
How has growth affected the sewage, the sewage and waste treatment? Have we had to increase anything? Are we looking at another plant, having to make another plant in a few years? What's that looking like?
Yeah, so that's something we closely monitor because clearly that's kind of the a critical point that can dictate growth and so forth, and slow growth if you don't have the capacities. Luckily, we've got a plant right now that can serve our current community no problem, and quite a bit of growth. I believe we're about 60% capacity, so we still have plenty of capacity to continue to handle growth. But that's no time to rest on your laurels. I mean, we went through an optimization program not long ago that actually added virtual capacity because we were able to optimize our equipment that was antiquated and make it much more efficient, which enabled it to handle sewage a lot more efficiently. We also did an I&I program, which is infiltration program, where we essentially smoke test all of our pipes and see where the gaps are, and we shore those up. So that way it slows down infiltration of rainwater. So again, we're not treating rainwater, we're treating sewage, which again helps capacity. So we're doing some things kind of creatively to carry our current plant along as long as we can. There are requirements by TCEQ that you've got to begin engineering at a certain point and then begin construction at a certain point. So that's why that 60% is a critical number, because when it hits, I believe it's 75, we start to engineer, and I think it's 90, or 85 maybe when we have to be under construction. And so that way you're always ahead of it, at least a little bit. But we continue to watch that. we have some subdivisions that are septic, so that certainly isn't a strain on our sewer plant. But there's also other developments that have come in that are higher density than what we anticipated. So it's constantly a balance of how much growth are you going to allow with a certain densities to take up that capacity in your plant. But we do watch it closely.
Okay. Now one of the big thing is obviously there's been building projects, and one of them is that old city hall really needed. Well, like we discussed, that old city hall really needed help. We got the new city hall online. So can you kind of because I did I did hear that we were over budget on the old city hall. If you could kind of speak to that, and then we'll kind of move to the new city hall and kind of how that's going.
Yeah, that's a great question. So where we're at, just to kind of fill all the viewers in. So we vacated our existing city hall, the city hall that people are accustomed to coming to for paying water bills and paying speeding tickets and so forth, and come to city council meetings. We've completely vacated that building. And so since summer, we are all across the street at the Beatty building, the Charles Beatty building. We're all packed in here in 3 different floors with the idea of vacating the existing city hall. So the city hall right now has a fence around it and is an active construction site. We've done a lot of testing there most recently. We're in the process of design to essentially rehab the 1911 building, which is the original post office building. It's kind of the oldest part of the building. And then we're actually going to do a demolition of the portion of the building that housed the development services folks, as well as the city council chambers and the municipal court. That area actually had some construction issues. We had some water infiltration, and it was at the end of the day, it was determined that we really just need to tear down that portion. So over the next several months, you're going to see the old 1911 post office still standing. We're going to rehab that and reoccupy that in a future date. We're going to tear down the city council chambers portion, the southern portion of that building, and build back a new city council chambers and a few city offices. And then a portion of the city staff will move back across the street out of the Beatty building into what will then be essentially the city hall building. And so that's kind of how that's all shaking out. We thought we were just going to rehab what was there, but it turned out that it was just in such bad shape that it's really more of a teardown situation. And we can do it right by starting with new construction. So that's the plan with that. As far as over budget, you were right. We had dollars set aside last year, and really it was just kind of a plug number. We knew it wasn't going to be the right number, but we had to set aside something. And we've come back to council twice over this last year to enhance that budget. And so that's our current budget right now is about $17 million for the project across the street. I mean, that's all costs. So hard costs are actually quite a bit less than I think maybe about 13,000 or 13 million. But we do have a finite budget, and we're working to design to that budget.
So when they were getting in there, they were like, Mr. Scott, this wall is not going to make it, or what it kind of give the viewers kind of a what caused that now we're going from that number to 17 million.
Yeah. So what happened was, this area of town actually has a very shallow water table. And for the longest time at the old city hall, I'll call that the city hall. This is now the Beatty building. So at the city hall building, there was water infiltration. In fact, we had mold issues that we knew about that we were constantly chasing. We had sump pumps to try to pull that water out of out of different, like the elevator pit. We had infiltration of rainwater through windows on a regular basis. There was just a problem with the water, the weather sheathing around the building to keep the water out and the moisture out, where that was transferring into the building. And so, as we started doing selective demolition, it became obvious that membrane was missing, and there were some bigger problems at play. Some windows were failing. The roof then had some concerns, and then that water infiltration from the ground really was kind of the deal breaker that said, we got to deal with that properly. Now we did on the Beatty building. We realized with that shallow water table, we have a whole elaborate water system to handle that groundwater underneath this building, and we needed something very similar in the City Hall building. We couldn't do it as the building currently stands.
Okay, that all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now the new building, you got it online. You're in there right now, which kind of, I completely forgot that you got to the new building, and I haven't had a chance to sit down in that. So I definitely have to do the interview in there next time.
Yeah, come on
But
down.
but you have the new building. Tell me, growing pains. What's going on with that? Is it what we expected? Go into that one.
Yes, let me say it's a fantastic building, and the fact that we kind of lived life in the old City Hall with cramped quarters and water and all the other things we dealt with. This building has been, gosh, night and day. I'll tell you, staff is just so appreciative to the voters and the citizens of Waxahachie for supporting this project. It's been very well received. Of course, when it's all said and done, this will become the development services building, and folks who are in the development, which is always the plan, people who are in the development industry will come here and have all their services handled, whether it be planning, building, zoning, utilities, any of those streets, any of those disciplines will all be handled out of this building. And I think it'll serve our community very well. So it's just a fantastic building named after a fantastic man, Charles
Yes.
Beatty, and a good friend. And so it's been wonderful. And everyone who's come in here has been so complimentary. With any building, you've got those punch list items. We're still working through those. We will for the next several months. We're knocking those out, but I'll tell you, it's fantastic.
That's good that it turned out. There's some big plans there, definitely. So since we're kind of on building, I'll keep on that real quick. Do we have some major building projects coming? What are they?
Yeah, so this past year, of course, we built the Beatty building. We also completed Fire Station 4. Both those came online this past year. Currently, we're under design for some city facilities for our parks department as well as our streets department. Both are in, I'd say, woefully inadequate facilities and have been for some time. And so council last year approved design dollars on our current budget to begin looking at building them a new facility. We haven't figured out exactly whether it'll be a shared facility or it'll be two independent facilities because a lot of their equipment and all overlaps and some of their needs overlap. But we're trying to find the best, most efficient way of handling that. And then dollars next year would be for the construction of those facilities. One of the things that we talked about in this next budget was also a gun range for the police department. We have an old gun range up at the animal control facility and animal services facility, and it's time to give them some more room. And so at our recent retreat back on April 11th, we talked about building a new gun range for our police department. And so those are a couple of big projects in the way of facilities that are coming up this next year that we'll begin design work on and moving ahead.
So let's talk the budget. We're rolling into this new budget. What priorities did you submit to the council? What did you, the city, when everything, all those department heads came up to you, what was what ended up with that?
So, like I said, we're still very early in our budget process. What I like to do is I like to have a what I call a mid-year retreat. It's more of just kind of a very elaborate workshop where we talk about capital improvement plan. And at that meeting, which was on April 11th, a lot of the heavy lifting in the budget is discussed because really we're talking about big dollars. We're talking about which projects are we going to issue bonds for this summer. And so that was the critical discussion out of that meeting was, are we all on the same page as far as what those big ticket items for this next year are going to be, which we'll issue bonds this summer, build consensus on those, and then that we can move towards issuing bonds this summer. And then the discussion for next year's budget, FY25, really becomes a lot simpler, right? We've kind of taken off those big ticket items, and now we can let's focus on operating needs, whether it be personnel, whether it be some replacement equipment, and we kind of focus on kind of the, I don't want to say smaller things, but because they're very much just as important, but just kind of a smaller price tag. But the way of priorities, DV, I would just say it this way. Council has been very steadfast with kind of what their priorities are. We've always said public safety, we have to have a safe public, a safe community. The public has to feel safe. So police, fire, emergency management, animal control, those things is a priority. So that's one thing. Fixing the aging infrastructure, which you and I've just talked about, is a priority. As a growing community, we always need to be looking at, well, what makes us attractive for families. So what are those quality of life projects, that need to be considered? And I will say this also, something that's a priority of council, and last year was very evident in what, some of the things that they approved, and that is it's had a very stable employment force and workforce at the city, because we don't make things at the city. Yes, we produce water, but outside of that, we're in the service business, and so we need people who are service minded, who are here to serve our community, and so we need to attract and retain employees who are not only professional, passionate about what they do, ready to jump in and serve the community, and do so at a very excellent level. And so attracting and retaining good employees is a priority of council as well. So, last year we did our compensation study, and they implemented that holistically. And so that it was just such a wonderful message to send to our staff that they are supported by council. And those priorities continue to hold true this next year. And that became obvious at that April 11th meeting. Streets, public works, or public safety rather, and making sure we've got good infrastructure and amenities to serve our community came to the top. And so that's how we're moving forward.
When it comes to policing, when Chief Weiser came up to you with what he'd like on that budget for the following year, I know that when I talked to him, like every police department, there was problems with recruitment, and there's problems with retention, and there's problems, there's just not problems, difficulties that are happening with every police department. So as far as wage increases, benefits, maybe fringe benefits, is that something that kind of is going to be presented to the council? Is that something that's on the table?
Thank you for asking that, because again, public safety is so important, right? I mean, a safe community is paramount to what we do, and we've been blessed because we have a police department that is very passionate about serving our community, and so they've been able to, even with a workforce that has had a number of vacancies in the past, like in other words, we staff them at a certain level, but they can only fill, a fraction of those positions or a certain number of those positions, and the positions that are left open, and that makes it difficult. And then last year, when we leaned on the salaries and made that more attractive, I'm proud to say that really the vacancy level went way down, and so consequently we have a more fully staffed police department right now. And I would also say that it's probably not where it should be, right? I mean, there was no sense of approving additional positions if you couldn't fill them, and so consequently, the number of approved positions was probably not what it could have been. And so Chief Weiser and I have talked about that. That really there's some target numbers we'd like to get to in the way of ratio of police force per population, and so that's what we're going to begin working on. And so with that 5-year plan, we have a 5-year operating plan. I mentioned 5-year CIP plan. We also have a 5-year operating plan. In that 5-year operating plan, we're going to talk about, okay, how can we phase in officers every year to get to that number, get that target number, and continue to grow that department with, commensurate with the growth of the community and the way of population. So we've made a lot of headway on that, and I'm so just grateful that that the market, the labor market has responded the way it has to some of the things we've done at the PD, and really a lot of our departments have really stabilized as a result of some of the things we've done. But PD has definitely felt where those vacancy numbers are way down, which is fantastic.
Now you got that new fire station that came online. Were you able to hire additional firefighters, and how we're doing with retention?
Yeah, really with fire's been great in that vacancies has never been an issue. We don't have high turnover. In fact, the past, I think it's about 3 years, my numbers may be a little off, but the past 3 years, I believe we've hired like 24 firefighters and we hire them kind of in advance of one was bringing, the fourth station on, right? So when you bring the fourth station on, you're adding an engine there. And so you got to staff that engine. Well, that's 12 firefighters. And then we also added another ladder truck this past year. And so we've staffed up to that. So you kind of, we've added a number of firefighters that have come on as a result of either adding an apparatus or bringing on in this case, a fourth fire station. And luckily, when we do a test, we do a test ahead of time. We've done 6 at a time, just to where we can do a test and make sure we take the top, the cream of the crop. And then we bring them on, get them integrated into the department, and then do another test and get 6 more. So we've done that successfully and added those personnel. So fire's in good shape in the way of, there's vacancies not an issue there.
Not there. Now, just in general, I wanted to ask you before I move on to just in general staffing. I know that there was an issue with the ambulance service that Waxahachie was using.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak about that subject? Are we looking to eventually go away from contract and have a staff one? Or, I mean, I know those are board decisions or council decisions, but is that something that the city, what's going on with that?
Yeah, and so ambulance service, right along with that's part of your public safety and being responsive to emergency needs. So before, where we're really having some issues was with AMR, which was our provider. And again, just to remind the viewers, we share a contract, or basically it's 4 separate contracts with the same provider, but with Ellis County, Red Oak, Ennis, then ourselves are all entered into the same similar agreement. And so that AMR was their contract was terminated last year, and Allegiance Ambulance is the new ambulance provider. And so they took over in January. And so really we're right now kind of still in the honeymoon phase with them as far as kind of them staffing up and ramping up their services. We're kind of in a wait and see situation, right? We had some struggles with the past provider. And so we're cautiously optimistic that things will go good with Allegiance. There's no reason to believe that they won't. But we got to give that time, and we need to keep an eye on that, because it is important to have good service to our community and make sure that we're getting the good response times that our citizens deserve.
So as far as staffing throughout the departments, how's that looking? Are you able to retain in this last little budget year? Have you been able to kind of gain some good staff or retain some good staff? Or
yeah, and I may have mentioned even last year, there's been a transition, and I think it's just kind of indicative of where we're at as a community. We've been able to attract professionals that I have to say, DD, that we've not been able to attract in the past, and we've been able to garner applicants for positions that frankly we've had to, I don't want to say settle, but they weren't necessarily the caliber that we've been able to get with the last 2 years, 3 years of postings. We're getting just outstanding professionals who are either seasoned in their fields or highly educated and bring a lot to offer to our community. So I think the quality of our staff has definitely improved. Our workforce has stabilized really across the board. I mean, some departments have bigger struggles because some of them are just prone just to the nature of the work. There is higher turnover, and that's true of any city. And so that it doesn't panic us. It's just kind of the nature of it. But we feel like we're in pretty good shape with our staffing these days.
Oh, good. Okay. Now moving on with this budget coming up this year. You talked about the priorities that are going on. I know that tax rate is something that's that's voted on by the council. Is there something? It's kind of a ballpark that you're looking at proposing this year to the council.
And that one, I'm going to kind of hedge my answer a little bit in that it's so early. When we're building a budget, you have to just make an assumption, right? So I always start with just let's keep it flat and let's see kind of how that looks. And so right now we're at 61 cents, and so I just said when we're kind of looking at numbers just for the sake of conversation, that's the number we put in there. But really, it's those appraisal numbers that ultimately are going to drive that decision. And we haven't even gotten appraisal numbers yet, or at least I haven't seen them. Maybe our finance department has, but I've not seen them yet from the appraisal district, even those early numbers. We don't get a certified roll till, July 25th. And so we're a long ways off from that, but you have to start somewhere. So really right now, we're just kind of saying just for conversation, that it'd be flat. And so if that's the expectation, then you'll be nothing but either you'll be pleased with whatever it's going to be, because it won't be any more than that. I can all but guarantee you, because I don't believe there's an appetite to go up on the tax rate. And so we'll just look and see what those appraisal numbers do, and we'll adjust accordingly.
Voters, voters often talk about, the tax and stuff like that, but just for the voters, when you, because I don't know the answer to this
Mhm.
question, when you propose these budgets, when they're put together in their packages to the council, do you say, okay, this is what the budget would look like at 61 cents. This is what the budget would look like at 60 cents. And this is the budget at no new revenue. Do you present something like that, or would that be too cumbersome?
No, we do something similar to that, and not exactly like that, just because there would be so many moving parts. But what we do is we give them an equivalent. So in other words, if if I present to them a balanced budget, okay, and that's something I feel I'm encumbered. It's incumbent upon me to do that every year. So present to them a balanced budget where I thought I've heard the priorities of council and try to balance that with the available dollars. Okay. And then if the decision is made or the appetite is to lower the tax rate, I say, well, here's what a penny would equate to. So in other words, if you were to go from 61 cents to 60 cents, you're going to knock out, $500,000, $400,000, whatever that number is. And then I would look to council and say, well, so what things are we going to remove? Like how do we keep a balanced budget? If that's the decision of council, how are we going to do that? And then so that's part of the conversation. The real part of the conversation is what is the plan moving forward? Because that's a gift that keeps on giving, because now your rate is going to be, let's say, 60 cents for the next year. And so you have that ripple effect. And of course we got debt service we've got to cover, as well as operating side of it. And so it's a very, the tax rate's a very delicate thing. And it's even more so because of some of the limitations that the legislature has put on us in the way of limitations on how much can be for the debt side versus the operating side, and what those caps are. And so it really is, it's a very delicate, kind of fragile balance. And so there's just a lot of moving parts, but we do try to have that conversation. I certainly don't want to box council into a corner where this is the right, take it or leave it. There's always an option. It's just you just need to understand what the ramifications of that decision would be.
Okay. Now, the as far, and I know you had said you haven't seen the numbers. Is there kind of a hint that the appraisal numbers are going to be a healthy, lower, or higher? Has there been kind of an indication? Maybe you haven't got the numbers, but a kind of indication that we're looking, or the city's looking good on the revenue side.
Yeah, I've not gotten any indication. Just to be honest, my gut tells me it's going to be down a little bit. I mean, it's certainly not going to be the rate that, or the growth rate that we experienced last year. Let's put it that way. I believe we're going to be soft on that a bit. It's just a question of like how much. And because I think some of some of the appraisals are down, but also our new growth is going to be down a little bit too, just from the rates we were, or the growth rates we were seeing last year and the year before that.
On the business side, in this last year, how have we been doing with those big businesses that got approved, and some of the industrial stuff that's got approved? How's that coming along, and how's our sales tax revenue looking like?
Sales tax is strong, and that is a wonderful thing for Waxahachie. We have a diverse sales tax base, which really helps us. We benefit a lot from the construction industry, but we also have a great retail base. Some of those abatements and all that we've offered in the past, it's amazing because some of those businesses have exceeded their timelines to where they're actually exhausting those abatements quicker, which is a good thing, right? We're giving we're recouping their money quicker to them, and therefore those abatements would go away that much sooner. I mean, the movie theater was one. The Academy shopping center was another one that's, again, ahead of schedule. So that to me is just an indicator that they've exceeded their pro formas, and I think that's a good indicator of positive spending in the way of retail and sales tax dollars in our community. And the big one out there is the Fanatics project, which everyone sees being built out there at 287
Jerry's World, as it's on my end, what it's called, Jerry's
Yeah,
World.
it's so funny. I always just say, I'm not even sure Jerry knows that he owns that. I mean,
Yeah.
like we give him all the credit, but I'm not even sure he even knows where
Just another
Waxahachie is.
billion. Just
Yeah,
another billion.
yeah, exactly. We try to be realistic about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that project is very exciting, because with that distribution center, there is a sales tax component which we're excited to see come online. There's also some additional pad sites and opportunities for restaurants and entertainment and so forth out there. And so that's just kind of a neat project that gets a lot of visibility. That we'll be excited to see that one come online. We have some other things that are in the works as well that I think will bode well for our sales tax numbers.
There was some talk about there being an issue or it being pretty slow to get permitting done for business in town. Is that correct? And is that something that you've addressed?
So I would answer that this way: is our numbers don't show that. Okay, I've heard that too, and I think there's probably more to the story in those cases. I think there are a few anomalies that maybe people have had that experience. A lot of times, DV, it's a result of what's submitted. And I'm not saying the city of Waxahachie is perfect or our staff is perfect, but a lot of times we can only process and analyze what we're being given. And if we're being given incomplete information or applications that don't necessarily either make sense or weren't well thought out, it can take longer. There's no question about it. It can take longer. If you go back and forth with engineers, they can play, engineering kung fu all day long, and it can just take forever. I think that's the exception because the numbers show that when a full application is submitted to the city of Waxahachie, commercial wise, it doesn't take any more than 15 days, 99% of the time for those to be turned around. Usually it's much less than that. Usually it's less than half of that it'll be turned around. Now in our residential side, we're at less than 3 days in turning around residential permits. And so again, I think if we get a complete application that is truly engineered, stamped, ready to go, and doesn't have gaps in their application, usually we can get that turned around very quickly. And so, I think you're maybe talking about some of the exceptions, but I have heard that as well. And like I say, certainly I would own it too if the city of Waxahachie dropped the ball on some things, which I'm sure we have. There's probably a few of those cases as well.
Have you looked just throughout in general? Have you looked at ways to streamline that? Do you continually review that process?
We do, and really we look at it from a lot of that is a workforce standpoint. Like in other words, how many, what's the expectation for our staff? Can they reasonably turn around this many projects in the time that what the expectation is? And so it's really kind of watching those numbers of how many applications we get and making sure that we don't overwhelm our staff and we give them a reasonable workload to meet that expectation.
Right. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you before I give you the mic is about the good stuff. Mm-hmm. What is it looking like for future rec and maybe the old town, future plans coming? Are there more parks looking to be put online? What do we got there on rec side?
Yeah, so part of our conversation, even just at our April 11th meeting, was recreation. Is kind of what do we want to do in the way of parks and making sure that we're meeting some of those needs of our community. And one of the things, DV, that came up was ball fields. Which is a topic that comes up quite a bit. Is are we adequate in the way of practice fields and so forth? And I think it's a resounding no. I mean, we have a sports complex, which is fantastic. But that's not a practice facility, nor should it be. That'd just be too much wear and tear on our complex to keep it as ready to host a tournament and so forth. But we do need to have more practice fields. So that's something we're looking very closely at in the way of bringing more of those on. Of course, our trail to Midlothian continues to progress. That'll be another 11-mile trail, which will connect Gassinana over to Midlothian. There's money allocated currently. We're in the process of identifying design and right of way, the route for that, as well as begin purchasing some of that land that we need for that. So that's progressing, and that's been a great cooperative project with Midlothian and our friends at the North Texas Regional Council of Governments. So yeah, I mean, I think there's some good things that are happening. We're actually even kicking around the idea of a rec center and kind of what that might look like. So I think there's some exciting things that are happening, and as a community that's very quickly approaching 50,000, those are things that we need to be looking at. And we're kind of in that those middle years as a community that say we're we need, you can't always act like a small town anymore. There's some things and some expectations that you need to start acting like a much bigger community. And I think a rec center, it would be kind of indicative of that. So that's something we're exploring. And council was interested in doing that. We're finishing up a lake project to fix our boat ramp and make the lake more accessible for boaters. That's finishing up right now. Should be open by Memorial Day, and then we're just kind of moving on to the next project. So I think there's some good things that are on the horizon for our community in the way of amenities.
Well, now this is the part where I shut up and just let you talk directly to people of Waxahachie and just kind of just give you the mic.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. One thing we didn't talk about, which I think is worth kind of highlighting, this next year, one of the things that we really had to pivot. We had to be kind of nimble in the way of our planning to respond to some of the other needs in our community. Is in the way of providing for our school system. Of course, there were bonds issued this past year for the second comprehensive high school, and the decision was made to move that to the south. There was some land bought to the south. And unfortunately, there's very little in the way of infrastructure to the south. And so our way of pivoting is saying, okay, what can we shift around in our capital plans to make sure that we're ready to offer streets, good roadway connections, water and sewer to serve that facility. And so a large portion of our budget this next year really is pivoting from what our original plan was to say, you know what, this is now the priority. And so I think it's important for the community to know that we work closely with our school district. We're friends with the school district. We partner on a lot of things. And this is just one example where we're saying, you know what, that's a bigger picture thing that we need to make sure we're ready to help them out and make sure that they're successful in bringing that school online. So you'll see that's come a big ticket item. There's a street piece, there's a water piece, there's a sewer piece that make up a large portion of the bonds we'll be issuing this summer. We're going to issue about $47 million worth of bonds this summer, with a generous portion of that going for serving that facility. But we're glad to do it because it's certainly great for our community. Kind of exciting times for the growth of the city. But I guess just in closing and just kind of from an open mic standpoint, I do just always want to express just the support that we get from the community is just so much appreciated. And I, like I alluded to earlier, we don't always knock it out of the park. We're not perfect at the city. We have 420 employees that are I think very good at what they do. They're human, and so there's that element. But we do a lot of things that I think people just don't realize that's the city doing them. And we put on events that happen seamlessly. That people just show up and things just happen and they're cleaned up the next day and they're like, you never had an event at all. And we get a lot of positive feedback from that. But it just speaks to the love and the care that this staff has for our community, and we appreciate council support. We appreciate the community support in helping us to be successful in doing that. So, yeah, we're always open for business, always open for comments and questions, and being here to serve our community. So please come down and see us or let us know how we can serve you.
Well, the one thing I will say is that every time that I've reached out to you with questions, you've always been willing to answer them, and that is fantastic. I mean, to be able to get information like that, and that transparency is something that's definitely needed in government. I appreciate you coming on and this informative interview. I mean, I learn something every time I sit with you, and then I'm like realizing, oh man, I didn't ask him about this, but we covered so much good stuff. Yeah. So I appreciate it. Can you stick around real quick after the show?
Yeah, glad to.
Thank you. Thanks.